Good morning, and welcome to the Allen Press webinar, Communicating and Promoting Science to the Public to Increase Awareness and Media Buzz. I'm Joanna Gillette, Product Marketing Manager at Allen Press, and I'll be your host today. On your screen, you should see some general information about participating in today's webinar. Our presenters will be answering questions at the end of the webinar, so if you do have questions, please feel free to chat those into the host, which is me, during the presentation, and we'll answer them at the end. We're using voice over IP technology to broadcast the audio for today's webinar. So if you're having trouble hearing, please make sure you have the volume turned up on your PC. Voice over IP quality may vary depending on network traffic today. So if you continue to have trouble hearing, you can always call in to listen to the webinar over our conference line. The toll-free telephone number and participant passcode for the conference line are listed next to the green telephone icon on this slide. If you do call into the conference line, please be sure to mute your telephone. You can continue the conversation with us and your fellow attendees after the webinar on the Allen Press Facebook page. Here, you can post a comment, share an idea, or ask a question. And of course, we also encourage attendees to tweet during and after the event using the hashtag APWeb29. Today, Taylor Fulton and Bridget Lamb will share best practices for how to communicate science to the public. They'll give ideas for how you can share the research you published, as well as how you can help your authors promote their work. Taylor Fulton joined Allen Press in 2011 as part of our Journal and Society marketing team. He currently works with 9 journals with disciplines in medicine, ecology, engineering. At Allen Press, Taylor is involved with all aspects of journal marketing, from strategic planning to the implementation and execution of specific tactics. A native of Atlanta, Georgia, Taylor is a graduate of the University of Kansas, where he received a Bachelor of Science in Marketing with an emphasis in entrepreneurship. Outside of work, Taylor enjoys running, traveling, and of course, KU basketball. Bridget Lamb works in our publishing department, handling Journal and Society marketing as well. She currently manages the marketing for 10 of our co-publishing titles and handles individual marketing activities for several other journals. Bridget also graduated from the University of Kansas with degrees in strategic communications and English. Bridget's still an avid KU fan, and in her free time, she likes to read, travel, and check items off of her bucket list. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Bridget now. Don't forget to send in your questions as we go.
Thanks, Joanna. Today we're going to discuss developing a communications plan aimed at driving usage of your journal's content and awareness of your field in general, by the general public specifically. So we all know that communication is important, but especially when a lot of things are going on or it's really noisy, like at Starbucks, things can get mixed up. Sometimes what we say and what people hear is not the same thing at all. These actual Starbucks cups are a humorous example of a problem that is prevalent in the scholarly community today. Some people are just not hearing us right. So in communication studies, this problem is known as the communications gap. It's the space between the speaker and the listener where things tend to get lost or confused. In the research world, this is caused a lot by the jargon used in papers. It's just too complex of language to be understood by the general public, or the context or big picture that's missing from the papers. These things make it hard for the public to bridge the communication gap on their own, and it's our job as the academic community to reach out to them in a clear and concise way. This is a really timely topic right now. This article came out on the Scholarly Kitchen blog about 2 weeks ago. It mentions several of the things that we're going to talk about today. But Taylor and I think that this is a really important topic, and therefore we've done a lot of research on it. Our presentation is going to be full of information and examples, and because especially there's so many examples, it may run a little bit on the longer side. But if you stick with us, I hope we can provide lots of great information and examples of how to close the communications gap and communicate your science to the public. So our agenda today is to briefly identify the problem that's going on, and then talk about tactics for your association to directly engage the public. And then because you don't have all the time in the world and you're really busy, we also want to give you some tactics to help your authors and members engage the public on their own. Finally, we'll wrap up with how to track and analyze the success of your efforts to engage the public. So the problem. There's really a disconnect between the academic world and the general public. A 2011 study in the journal Public Understanding of Science, this is a quote from it, says 85% of scientists think it's a major problem that the public does not know very much about science. All of these words around the thought bubble here are words that researchers used when they were explaining how the general public interprets science. You can see they're not the most positive words, but at least the scientists and academics see that there is a problem. And thankfully, also in our research, we see that a lot of academics want to fix this problem. So when they're setting out to fix this problem, they run into a couple roadblocks as well. Academics spend a lot of years being trained to think and communicate scientifically. A lot of the comments in the Scholarly Kitchen article that I mentioned earlier defend the use of jargon in research papers. They say it's necessary to keep the articles concise and thorough, but it makes it really confusing. There's something called a flesh reading score that Taylor's going to talk a little bit more about later. But according to that score, scientific writing and academic writing in general has the lowest score for reading ease and human interest. So it's confusing and, frankly, sometimes a little bit boring to read. So my experience with marketing at Allen Press and from doing a lot of surveys with association members and readers of journals is that practitioners in a field, for example, doctors, have a hard time understanding or being interested in the research that's done in their field. So there's a disconnect between the practitioners and the academics. That training and specialized knowledge that academics have is actually kind of coming back to bite them and make it harder to communicate to people outside of the academic world. So as I looked more into this issue, I thought it was interesting that the gap in the science world is a lot larger than in the humanities. Humanities is just a little bit more approachable for the general public. But regardless of what field your association, society, or publication focuses on, there is a gap, whether it's large or small. And you signed up for this webinar because you wanted to learn how to bridge it and get your information out to the public. So this is kind of an ideal cyclical situation that we see that, ideally would happen if you are clearly communicating your science and research to the public. The research is going to happen. You're going to clearly communicate it in the first place so that the media can report on it and the general public can learn about the true facts of what's going on in the science world or the academic community. This in turn makes the journal, the author, and the institution that funded the research look really good. And when we have an informed public, our society can help drive public policy that's based on facts. And when the facts and scientific truth guides policy and funding decisions, then the research that really needs to be done can hopefully be funded, therefore causing more research to occur. Obviously, this cycle that we're proposing is an ideal and not a guarantee, but we think it's worthwhile to work towards. So now I'm going to transition to Taylor. He's going to talk about some of the tactics that you as an association, publisher, or society can do to help make your research understandable to the public and increase engagement.
So our first section will begin with the various tactics and tools you as a publisher, society, or organization can use to better communicate your science to the public. This includes things like press releases, conference presentations, social media, blogs and podcasts, and other new types of media. So when considering how to communicate your scientific research, you first need to think about the who, the what, the where, and why. Who are you talking to? What are you trying to tell them? Where are you communicating with them? And again, why? While the target audience for scientific research is generally highly educated scholars and academics, if you want to really reach a broader market, you need to make the content much more understandable to your who. In this case, your who is the general population. A popular blogger named David Dobbs, who regularly contributes to Wired magazine, states that you should even go as far as, quote, hunting down jargon and killing it. Finally, Your content or communication strategy may need to be adjusted depending on what channel you're utilizing. Since most press releases, social media, or other communication channels are completed over the internet, a casual yet professional tone would be very ideal. Distributing press releases is one of the most common and effective ways to get your science out there to a large audience. But how do you turn a complicated scholarly manuscript into a very easily readable news article? The most important factors to consider is, what does the public want to know, as well as what implications does the research have? When creating a press release, think simply, what is the point? Why should the audience care? But there is a challenge. Scientific reports and news articles are literally structured completely opposite of each other. Scientific manuscripts begin with the background information, then add some supporting details, and finally wrap up with the results and conclusion. On the other hand, news articles want to know the results first. The article then continues with the information that matters, then adds any additional supporting details. So your press release should present journalists with a simplistic explanation of the research conducted and impact of the results. Again, jargon is bad. Try using easily understandable scientific phrases. So for example, a recent article published in the journal Herpetologica discussed the predator-prey relationship between the king snake and the copperhead populations in the southeastern United States. With a recent ecological shift, the area has seen a decrease in pig snakes, who often prey on poisonous copperheads. Thus, there has been a huge increase in the copperhead population. This increases the risk for poisonous snake bites and other consequences of ecological imbalance. A science blog called Buzz, Hoot, Roar, which specializes in illustrations and infographics depicting scientific research, picked up the press release, then incorporated it into an infographic and cited the original herpetological article. The caption succinctly describes the research at hand. Quote, "Here's how it works. Non-venomous king snakes eat other snakes, like venomous copperheads. Where king snake populations drop, copperheads, and therefore perhaps potential for copperhead bites, leap. So keep your king snakes, folks." Utilizing social media like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn is another effective route for disseminating your scientific research. By posting simplified abstracts or article descriptions, as well as video presentations with links to the original article, you can generate discussion and drive traffic to your website. But remember, although your readership may be made up of mostly scientists and academics, your social media pages are open to the public, so any posts, tweets, or other content that you're distributing should be made readable for everyone. And remember also that each social media platform that you're communicating with will change depending on the information you're providing. So for instance, LinkedIn groups can provide a discussion forum, and researchers can add published works to their own profiles for others to comment on and interact. Twitter, on the other hand, operates on shorter posts and often include a link to the full article. And responses on Twitter are usually one-on-one or a small group of people that talk directly to one another. Facebook is generally less formal than LinkedIn, but a little more personal than Twitter, and provides ample room for discussion and interaction. But perhaps the most powerful channel of social media communication for scientific research is in fact YouTube. YouTube is a great platform for authors and researchers to explain the research utilizing both audio and visual. When paired with the written content in a journal, the science can be communicated much clearer and provides the audience with a much better understanding of what the researcher has done and what the conclusions are. In the screenshot shown on this slide, an author has actually used YouTube to have puppets act out their research. And this actually greatly helped in making the science much less formal and removed much of the technical jargon often used in journal articles. Now I want to show an example of how making science more easily understandable can benefit your organization. In November of 2013, the editor of Rangeland Ecology and Management, David Brisky, was featured in the New York Times blog .earth. The editorial David wrote in an issue of Rangeland responded to a TED Talk that was given by Alan Savory and debated the impact of Savory's proposed method. The New York Times article, as well as the editorial, were shared on the Society's social media pages such as Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. After these posts, we looked back and saw that Facebook collected 4 shares and 15 likes. LinkedIn collected 24 comments, some of which were quite lengthy and discussed both sides of the topic at hand. And finally, after the momentum of the article had slowed down a bit, we used Google Analytics to see what the website received 50 visits from social media channels for these posts. In fact, this was the most website traffic from social media we've seen since we started utilizing the channels. And we think that this clearly shows that the power of making science understandable and using sources such as blogs and social media, especially when paired with hot-button topics and issues, is very powerful. Blogs, podcasts, and other new media provide exciting venues for scientific information and communication. Live events such as TED Talks, Science on Tap, and local nerd nights are becoming increasingly popular across the country. These events feature one or more speakers that present on new research topics with the goal of sharing scientific information with the community in a very informal setting. But on the online space, these discussions often take the form of blogs or podcasts. The internet provides ample space for niche blogs and podcasts of any kind, similarly to what we saw in the Buzz, Booth, Roar example with Herpetologica. Authors could utilize blogs or podcasts to explain their research in layman terms and provide information not featured in the journal article. Podcasts could also be used for editor and author interviews, where you could feature frequently asked questions and clear up any miscommunication that was found in the journal article. And it's pretty obvious, but the ideas for the internet are limitless. And what makes these resources great is that the cost is usually extremely low. If you can create a little bit of time and organize your content to fit some of these platforms, it can really supplement your content and reach your audience in a more innovative manner. So the final idea I want to share with you before I hand it back over to Bridget is what societies and publishers can do to make science more understandable in terms of inviting the media to your annual meeting. And this could be media members within your industry. They could be local news affiliates where your annual meeting is taking place. They could be small websites or even bloggers. And the strategy is very simple. By offering free admission to your annual meeting, your society and the journal could receive very low publicity from the media. And you could even point media members in the right direction by recommending certain symposiums or discussions, upcoming topics, or other hotly debated issues. If you're having any trouble thinking of media members to invite or you don't quite have the contacts, try looking at a recent press release you sent out on behalf of your journal or society. Or if you don't know from there, you can always survey your membership. With hundreds or sometimes thousands of individuals, there's usually somebody who might have a connection. A good example of society inviting the press to their annual meeting is the Association for Psychological Science. As you can see in this screenshot, they have a page on the website solely dedicated to the press and how an individual can register for free access to scientific poster sessions. They also have information about appropriate credentials and other frequently asked questions that come up regularly. So if you're interested in this sort of tactic, it may be worth looking at the APS website. Now that I've discussed ways in which societies, publishers, and other organizations can communicate science and increase awareness, I'm going to turn it back over to Bridget. She's going to discuss what authors and researchers can do.
Thanks, David. As people in the field, your members also care about promoting and strengthening the discipline. Authors care a lot about spreading your research as far as possible. These groups can help you drive traffic and increase public awareness. So if you want their help, you really need to think about what motivates them, because that's the best way to get people to help is think about what's important to them. So knowing your audience and their priorities, especially for authors, the priorities tend to be threefold. They really care about developing and maintaining a good reputation in their field. They also care about feedback on their actual research articles and just, what they're studying in general. They really want to hone their knowledge. And finally, tenure. All my research shows that this is extremely important to authors. It guides a lot of what they do and the decisions that they make. The three traditional pieces of tenure are teaching, scholarship, and service. That's what these professors are being assessed on at their universities to see if they can get tenure. The importance to each category really differs by university, but at some level, all three of these categories are important to all academics. The downside of these priorities is that sometimes they can get in the way of getting their help. It's tending to trend away from this, but there's this, perception that's been around for a long time that there's a negative stigma attached to being a public intellectual. I read a lot of interesting blogs and research about this. Someone who shares research with the general public can be seen as somebody who's wasting their time because they're not spending it on doing more in-depth research. But this misperception is slowly going away, which is great news for us. Furthermore, outreach is not always viewed as a requirement in the tenure process. Teaching is part of it, but sometimes that can be limited to the institution. And the other branches of tenure can really keep these professors extremely busy, so they have limited time for outreach. Furthermore, there's a fear of being misinterpreted or misquoted if they're talking to the media or reaching out to the public. It could make them look bad if they're, portrayed in the media in an incorrect way, and that could negatively impact their reputation. But though there's a few downsides, there's way more upsides, which is great news. Many grants and funding organizations now require an outreach component to any project that they're going to fund. And there are more and more resources for sharing data and pressure for scientists to do it, both within the community and from these funding organizations. Furthermore, academics are realizing that social media is great for networking, getting articles they need, feedback, and support, so more and more academics are on social media, and that's a great resource for doing outreach. Furthermore, at institutions, outreach is becoming a more and more important part of tenure. Because institutions, especially state-funded ones, really want a good reputation and to prove their worth to the general public, they want them to do some outreach. So, for example, this is an excerpt from Miami University's Guidelines for Evaluating Service. You can see they value when professors interact with their fellow academics at meetings or as part of organizations, but they also really value reaching out to the public community as a larger whole. Furthermore, academics, like I said, are trending away from the bad reputation of doing outreach. Peers say it's acceptable to engage in outreach activities as long as it's with a quality news source and the academic knows what he or she is talking about. They want them to be an authority figure in the topic, not somebody who has no idea about this field and then is, interviewed in the media about it. They want somebody who knows what they're talking about. This fits with the finding that most academics who do outreach activities are currently in the middle or later years of their academic career. They've had time to develop that reputation and become an authority figure, so then it's acceptable from their peers' point of view for them to do outreach. So peers are okay with it now, which is great news. And the outreach needs to be for the sake of the field and less outrightly self-promotional. So you want to get your authors to help you share their research, but they need to be careful to do it in a way that's, trying to benefit the public in the best way possible. So these are a few of the topics that tactics, that I'm going to discuss today that you can use to try and get your authors engaged with promoting their own research, promoting the field in general, and getting your members buy-in as well. Remember, the whole point of this is to help your members and authors speak and communicate as clearly as possible. We're trying to avoid the miscommunications that clearly happen here. So one great idea is simplified abstracts. Simplified abstracts are a quick, contextual, and simply stated summary of a research article. You can make this an actual part of your publication and have, your normal traditional abstract and then simplified abstract. For example, Rangelands, which is one of our co-publishing titles here at Allen Press, does something like this, and they call it their on-the-ground section. And it's intended for, a quick look at what this is about and what somebody can have as a takeaway from it. Then you, as a society, can take this wording that's already been written by the author and use it to develop a press release or post to social media or even make a blog out of it. It's already written. You just need to translate it into other outlets. So if making a change to your publication right now seems kind of complicated, there are several other services that host simplified abstracts, and you don't have to make it a part of your actual publication. So Kudos is one such service. Its business model is that authors can upload their own summaries of the article and why it is important. This is an example of one of their article pages. You can see the author can link out to the original publication and then also answer the questions, what is this about and why is it important? They really want you to use it as simple of language as possible. Similarly, Mini Manuscript does a similar thing, but it isn't just isolated to authors uploading these summaries. It wants anybody to upload a summary of an article. It's kind of like a recommend an article to a friend. You give them a brief synopsis of what it is, and then tell them about it. These are great options if you don't want to publish simplified abstracts in your journal. So you could direct your authors to one of these resources and ask that they create a simplified abstract and host it there. Both of these services have options to upload extra files like news stories, press releases, data sets, audio, images, and video. They've realized that sometimes it's easier to explain something in person, so to say, or on a video or with a podcast. It makes it more interesting, so they give space for authors or peers to provide these extra resources to make it as approachable and interesting as possible. Like I said, explaining research in person and in video is becoming more popular. Taylor shared the example of the author using puppets to explain his research. You can also do a video abstract. That's slowly become something that some journals are looking into, and our websites can host videos, so you can do that if you're interested. So I found a few journals that are doing this and watched a few of their video abstracts, and it made it a lot easier for me personally to understand what was going on. I've included a link here to a video abstract, actually of an article that analyzes video abstracts, so it's full of information, so that you can have an example of what a video abstract would look like. Also, some live venues where people are presenting their research are really interesting. Taylor talked about them briefly earlier, but I'm going to explain it a little bit more. TED Talks, I'm sure everybody's heard of them, are very popular. They've been around for a long time, and their videos are just all over the internet. And now there's hundreds of TEDx conferences, which are affiliated but slightly spin-off, that are held all across the world. There's probably one at a local institution or for your city that you could encourage your authors to be a part of. Then those YouTube videos that come from that can also be shared. Science on Tap is similar. We have one here in Kansas and Morris where academics sign up to do it, and a host sits down with them and they have a beer and they talk about their research. Really informally, really casually, and just in a way that's interesting. The videos of all of these presentations expand the reach of this research to even more people in an accessible way. Nerd Night is something I personally enjoy attending, and it's anybody can sign up for it. Usually they're a group of paper presentations on a similar topic, but if somebody knows something, they want to share it with people, so they get up and give a presentation. The ones I go to are extremely well attended, and people get a lot of engagement. You always walk away from it knowing something more. So, our society in general right now, people are really interested in learning new things, as long as they're explained in a simple and interesting and approachable way. Video and in-person presentations are excellent ways to do this, and you can inform your members about these opportunities because they may not know about it, and encourage them to participate. You can also provide tools for your authors. So in an acceptance email or maybe a follow-up email after the article has been published, you can encourage authors to set a Google alert for their paper and engage in dialogue about anybody who's blogging about their article or tweeting about it. Just encourage them to start that discussion. You can also provide a paragraph that they could, just copy and paste and send to their institution, announcing that they've been published in this research. Because like I said, institutions are really on board with promoting their professors and sharing what's going on. For example, the University of Kansas, this is an excerpt from their public affairs guidelines, and this highlighted section says, the visibility of KU faculty experts in regional and national news enhances the image and reputation of the university. Universities really want to show off what their faculty is doing. And so if you give them, your authors, a paragraph that they can just pass along to their, this department, the Public Affairs Committee, then that communication gap is cut down, and maybe it's more likely that you can get the institutions to help promote this research and your author in the field as well. Another tool that you can give your authors is just a list of listservs, forums, hashtags, just resources relevant to your discipline. Compile all them on your website and put it up there so that it's easy to find. This will be especially helpful for anybody who's newer to your field and can just get them started in outreach and conversation and just promoting the field in a simple way. Some of the hashtags that I think your members might not know about, or authors that are worthwhile, are Scholar Sunday. It's a hashtag that's used by people to refer to others that they see, refer to other people on Twitter that they see as useful resources to follow. So you can see the hashtag Scholar Sunday and then explain why they're useful to follow. So for some talented bioengineers, follow, this list of 5 or 6 people in their field. This can just, get people more connected. If anybody is interested in the field, they can just have more connections. ECR chat is specifically aimed for early career researchers, and, it's a peer-to-peer contact where they can talk about tools that are useful for them, share their experiences, what worked, what didn't, how that worked out. And finally, discipline specific. I think this would probably be the most useful for outreach. Find hashtags, hashtag snakes is clearly interesting for anybody who's interested in snakes, but they might not know about hashtag snakes at your service, which is a program, hashtag that's being used to share a lot of really interesting facts and engaging photos and links to articles. Just having a list of those hashtags where your members and authors can find them can really get them using them. They can't use it if they don't know about it. Another thing you can have on your website is a database of people within your society, maybe your members, maybe your authors, just people who are willing and trained or capable of talking to the media, public, patients, etc. Anybody who's getting online. Everybody starts their research online now, and if you can make it easy to find contacts within the field who are knowledgeable, people in the public, it'll make it easier for them to find. So, for example, I work with the Cleft Palate and Craniofacial Journal, and the Cleft Palate Foundation has a listing, a database online of all of the cleft treatment teams within the country and internationally as well. That makes it really easy for patients to find a team to work with, but also if I'm a member of the media, that makes it easy for me to find somebody to write about in my story. The really good news is that a large portion of scientists believe that they have benefited in their careers due to media visibility. This chart from one of the articles that I read shows that a large portion of scientists feel that this helped their career. 60% of U.S. neuroscientists in this study felt that the media visibility had a mostly positive impact on their careers. And just that small area up at the top, less than 15% thought it had no impact or a negative impact. So there's a lot of ideas of things that you can compile for your authors. You can also work directly with them to educate and train them on how to do outreach. At your annual meeting, you can schedule simulation exercises or maybe a roundtable discussion where you give various scenarios of interviews or outreach opportunities and have everybody talk through together how they would handle it, what they would do, and how they could handle it better. This just creates familiarity with outreach among your members and authors. Another great idea is a press release writing workshop where members literally bring their latest research and you help them write a press release for it, talk them through the process, and give them a tangible takeaway of a press release of their research they can then use to share with other people because it's simplified wording. By offering opportunities for workshops and training sessions, you're teaching your members and authors the skills to be able to do this on their own. If compiling your own curriculum for these training sessions seems overwhelming, a lot of other people have tried it, so there's great resources. The European Science Communications Network developed one of these programs and then actually did a research paper about it. So they set out to study if communication workshops can effectively train scientists for public engagement. The good news is that you can. They worked with 125 researchers in a variety of fields and offered them a number of different courses centered on different scenarios of public engagement or, practical training things. Practical skills like press release writing and the theoretical-based scenarios. The more practical sessions, feedback said, were more beneficial to the scientists, so that's what I would really recommend that you do for your members. Their actual modules are available online with this hyperlink here, which we're going to share our slides later, so you can get that information later. So you don't have to plan anything. You can just use the lessons they've already come up with. And 94% of the people who participated in one of these studies found the experience beneficial. And even if you don't even want to arrange a scenario at all, the National Science Foundation and the American Association for the Advancement of Science offer training programs for this. So training sessions where they teach scientists how to explain their research in simple terms. So I'm going to share a video of one young scientist practicing his 3 points simplified of what he said, something he was training how to do in one of these training sessions. And hopefully you can understand what he's studying clearly.
Alternative energies. And so one of the big alternative fuels right now is biodiesel. And one of the issues we have with that is that it makes about 10% of what you make is just a waste product. There's no fuel right now. And so my research focuses on ways to convert that waste product into a more valuable fuel. And there's 3 great things we can do with this. First of all, by turning the waste product into something more valuable, we can improve the economics of making biodiesel, make it cheaper to use and more profitable to make. And secondly, just by using more biodiesel, we're also reducing climate change and reducing our dependence on foreign oil. And thirdly, even more so than that, the chemicals we can make from this waste product are currently being made from oil. So by making them from this renewable resource, we're also further reducing our dependence on oil to make specialty chemical products.
So he's obviously working on it. Seems a little self-conscious about it, but I think he does a great job explaining what his research is, and at least I was able to walk away from that video having an idea of what it was and why it's important, which is really what you're trying to communicate to the general public. So armed with this type of training, scientists and academics of all types are more prepared to and confident about communicating with members of the media, the general public, and other people in their field in a clear way. And as more fields are becoming more specialized, even other people within your discipline might have a hard time understanding what you're studying if you're using all the jargon and scientific terms. So it's even important to be able to talk to other people within your same discipline to be able to clearly communicate it. So these training sessions are extremely worthwhile. Finally, there's probably some people within your organization that are already doing this really well. You really want to allow them to kind of mentor other people within your organization that might not be doing this. So find people who are already doing this well and let them present at your conference or have them head up a roundtable discussion. You can note them in your newsletter or send out a note in your newsletter that features one of these members who's doing public engagement really well, or share their accomplishments on social media. Just giving visibility to people who are doing this well will perpetuate it farther and farther within your organization. Peer-to-peer contact is proven to increase and improve involvement in outreach. This was one of the most interesting things that I found from all of my research. When you see other people within your field doing this, then you're more likely to do it. It's especially important to have the more advanced scholars and researchers present, mentor, inspire those younger people so that they, can dispel that I'm afraid of doing outreach perception and instead go forward with it and just start this next generation of everybody doing outreach and being engaging all the time. So the final tactic I want to share with you that will help you create a culture of members promoting their own research or contributing to the field in general is offering rewards when somebody's doing it well. When an author presents their paper at a conference or is interviewed by a member of the media, or even just tweets about their article, you can reward them with something valuable that they care about, like discounted page charges or temporary open access to their article, maybe a discounted conference attendance. Just give them something that they care about for something that you care about. The National Association of Realtors actually just implemented a program where they started doing this. They call it Member Value Plus, MVP. So within 8 months, they did, it's every 2 weeks they offer a new rewards program. And so they've given out about $400,000 worth of rewards, which is mostly in white papers and things like that. So it's a high dollar amount, but pretty easy to implement, not actually that costly. But they got 24,000 member engagement actions, which is extremely significant. So figuring out something that works for you and, rewarding your members for it is a great idea to get people participating with the public. So finally, I just want to wrap up with a case study of one organization that realized they needed to do this. There's a paper actually about the Society for Neuroscience. This is a quote from it about how they really knew that they needed to go out there and talk to the public. There was a lot of research being done about the brain and the mind, and it was confusing and alarming to the general public. So the society realized they really need to get out there and get in front of the public and tell them what's actually going on and be in control of that communication. So they created awards that reward and publicize people within their society who excel at outreach. They also created a database of neuroscientists who are willing and trained to talk to members of the media, so it can get that communication as clear as, as quickly and easily as possible for members of the media who are looking for somebody to talk to about a story. They also became really active on social media, and they started a public interfacing website called brainfacts.org that presented research and other information in a really clear, understandable way. So all of these things combined to create a culture where communicating with peers and the public was really easy, and it was rewarded and encouraged. So the results were great. They realized they had this, issue in 2008. So since then, their presence in the media has grown. Just between 2011 and 2013, the number of media hits to their content has almost doubled. Their membership has also continued to grow, which is always a fantastic side benefit. So this case study really shows what dedication to promoting your research and giving your members the tools to promote their research can really result in. So I'm now going to turn this back to Taylor. He's going to talk about how you can measure how your authors are currently doing with this clear communication and overall how to measure the success of your communications plan.
Thank you, Bridget. Now that we've laid out the issue at hand, we've discussed tactics that your society or publisher can implement, as well as tactics that your authors and members can implement, we're going to turn our attention to how to measure these efforts. So just like any marketing strategy or tactic, analyzing the response data and determining the success of your efforts is going to be crucial to making educated decisions moving forward. Therefore, we're going to now talk about how you can measure the journal, the society, your authors, and members on how clearly they're communicating your science. So for those of you interested, there's a very detailed discussion of measuring the communication of science in a journal called Science Communication, and the article is entitled An Instrument for Assessing Scientists' Written Skills and Public Communication of Science. But for this presentation, I've just decided to take a few metrics proposed in the Science Communication article that I would like to share with you today. So first, A little bit of background information. The authors of this study asked scientists to basically write a paragraph about their research while keeping in mind that the target audience was the general public. But before they could evaluate the writings of their researchers, they had to develop a system for how to measure each scientific phrase and paragraph. So what do you think they did? Well, like any intelligent person would do, they simply just used Google. In order to categorize certain scientific words or phrases, the authors decided to use Google News as a means of classifying jargon. If the word or phrase received over 80,000 hits on Google News within a 3-year time span, it was considered not jargon. Examples for non-jargon words included virus, galaxy, and atom. If the word or phrase had between 8,000 and 80,000 hits, it was deemed a familiar science concept, and these words included gravity and nitrogen. So in all, the authors of this paper created 5 categories of scientific terms, with the most confusing, perplexing, and baffling scientific terms labeled as, quote, strictly professional concepts. So we classified these jargon, but now what do? Well, scientists being scientists decided to create a very complicated formula in an attempt to simplify the measurement of jargon. So there is some irony here, but the good news is that the formula is actually really beneficial for quantifying readability and how understandable your research is. It also allows us as publishers and editors better understand how well certain authors, certain marketers, or other individuals within the organization are at explaining the science to the general public. So now that we know a little bit more about how scientific jargons are classified and the formula looks like, let's take a look at an example from the article. In this example, a scientist of parasitology was asked to discuss their research. So I'm going to quote what this scientist said. I study how tissue damage by an intestinal parasite promotes an immune response. Our body is programmed to recognize toxins, cancerous cells, and infections such as viruses and bacteria by detecting danger signals. These signals consist of molecules that are not found in the human body under normal conditions, such as the endotoxin secreted by bacteria. When an intestinal parasite, such as Trichinella, infects the intestine, it destroys some of the intestinal epithelial cells, and these cells release their own danger signals called alarmin. We are interested in a novel alarmin called IL-33, which is required for the body to develop a potent immune response to the parasite. The same type of immune response induced by IL-33 is involved in allergic asthma and autoimmune diseases, such as ulcerative colitis. And that's the end of this paragraph. So by following the categorization theory that we discussed in the article, there are approximately 6 familiar science concepts, all of which were not described by the scientist. There were 4 recognizable science concepts, again, none which were described by the scientist. There were 4 unfamiliar science concepts, 2 of which were described, 2 of which were not. And finally, there were 2 strictly professional concepts, both of which were described. So if we plug this into the jargon index formula, we get a final score of 26. But what does 26 mean? While it's difficult to judge whether this is a good score or a bad score without having data from other authors' writings, we do know that the optimal goal is to have a low jargon index score. And we know this because the equation is dictated by high multiples for words or phrases without descriptions and low multiples for words or phrases with descriptions. Another method for measuring scientific communication is the Flesch reading score, which Bridget described briefly earlier in this presentation. This analysis is based on the average sentence length as well as the average syllables per word in a document. A score is measured from 0 to 100, with the notion being that the higher the score, the easier the content is to read. According to the article, a score of 60 to 70 is considered pretty sufficient and can be understood by as low as 9th graders. The great thing about the Flesch reading e-score is that Microsoft Word can actually run this analysis in just a few seconds by utilizing the Spelling and Grammar Report under the Review tab. So what I like most about the Jargon Index and Flesch reading score is that they can be used for a variety of different content. Sure, you can use them as we did here for scoring authors' research summaries or abstracts, but we can also use them for marketing activities such as press releases, social media, blogs, and so on. So for instance, one of the issues we face here at Allen Press is creating a press release that accurately summarizes a newly published article while making sure it is comprehensible to individuals outside the research community. Instead of using our gut reactions or general opinions to judge a press release, we can use these types of analytics to have a better understanding of how to maximize the effectiveness of our press releases and make them more understandable to a general audience. Now that we've discussed measuring written content, I want to turn our attention to how we can evaluate your communication plan that is now filled with the wonderful tactics Bridget and I provided earlier in this webinar. The first question you need to ask yourself when tracking your communication plan is very simple. Is this working? Is my research more understandable to the general public? Is my publication or society getting more media attention? Are my authors more active on social media or other digital marketing channels? And some bottom line questions. Are people more aware of my journal or publication? And are these efforts benefiting my publication in terms of page views, manuscript submissions, journal metrics, or total revenue? To answer these questions, there are certain tactics in your communication plan that you must track. These include social media, press releases, website traffic, user surveys, journal metrics, and user interactions online. Of course, there are many more variables that you could track, and I would encourage you to do so. But because this webinar has mainly focused on these certain tactics, this is what we'll be recommending today. So let's look at some examples of how to track these and what you can be looking for to measure your communication plan. In today's world, Twitter may be one of the most powerful methods for communicating science and promoting your journal. In the beginning, a major downside of Twitter was the lack of information and data you could actually track. There really wasn't any simplified way of gathering analytics or telling if your communication was really benefiting or not. That's not the case anymore, though. Twitter has this new fancy dashboard that you can easily utilize to measure your marketing tactics. You can filter your tweets by date. You can adjust the level of detail shown by altering the time frame for impressions. You can break out your tweets into campaigns and view things like clicks, retweets, impressions, replies, and favorites. You can also download all of this data into a CSV file where you can filter it and play around with it a little more. You can also track individual tweets within a certain time frame, see how well each has performed, and determine what types of tweets drive the most engagement within your audience. For instance here, the Allen Press tweet, Science, Style, and Format, Council of Science Editors Manual for Authors, Editors, and Publishers is now available at sciencestyleandformat.org. We can see in this little analytics chart that the tweet collected 1 favorite, 3 retweets, and 4 link clicks. As you can see, Twitter Analytics works great for quantitative data. But what about qualitative? How can you track your audience's conversations on Twitter? I would recommend the best way to analyze qualitative data is to establish a unique hashtag that only you utilize for all of your tweets and that you encourage others to utilize as well when referencing the journal or society. For example, meetings and conferences have gotten really good at utilizing specific hashtags. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was at the Medical Library Conference in Chicago and was really impressed at the number of individuals tweeting about the conference and using the MLA.net hashtag. However, what I've noticed is that journals and societies are generally lagging behind in this department. So in terms of social media marketing, I'm a fan of the journal Methods in Ecology and Evolution. But one thing I've noticed is that they rarely use hashtags. And in fact, this isn't unique to them. Most journals seem to lack a branded hashtag altogether. And this makes following interactions and conversations about your journal much more difficult. Wouldn't you want to easily be able to see what people are saying about you? Very similarly to Twitter, Facebook Insights dashboard, you can see the percentage of total likes versus the previous week. You can see your post total reach and the increase or decrease from the week before. You can see your audience's engagement with your Facebook content in terms of likes, comments, shares, and links. And like Twitter, you can see these analytics with each individual post or as an aggregate through time frame filters. What I want to show you now is a report we currently run through Google Analytics for journals that utilize social media marketing on a regular basis. Recently, one of our cooperative publishing partners began using Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn to promote journal articles, manuscript submissions, the annual meeting, and other general society-related news and events. When comparing the journal's year-to-date website usage from the previous year, we found that sessions increased by 11%, users increased by 9%, page views increased by almost 7%, and the average session duration increased about 2%. Furthermore, the Society's audience on social media utilized the comment section of Facebook and LinkedIn to interact with one another and discuss articles that were posted and other industry-related topics and news. So the point of this slide is to show you two things. One, how Google Analytics can be utilized to track social media effectiveness, and two, how important social media is for increasing awareness for your journal or organization. Press releases are often distributed in two ways, and this is another way we've shown that you can promote your science online. One way is through a targeted email list of media and industry-related contacts. And like any other email marketing distribution, this allows you to track the total press release distribution, the bounce rate, open rate, click-through rate, as well as which links are being clicked the most. The second manner in which a press release is distributed is through a PR wire such as PR Web or Newswise. And for this distribution method, the analytics are much more advanced. You can see things like clicks through geography. You can filter it based on time frame. There's just a lot more analytics you can gather, and it allows you to see a fuller picture of how your press release performed out in the media. So while traditional journal metrics such as the impact factor may not be the best statistics to measure the effectiveness of your marketing tactics, there is a set of kind of new wave metrics known as alt metrics, and it allows publishers to track the usage and penetration of their articles in real time. Now, many will argue that the validity of alt metrics has been undecided and that a high score, doesn't necessarily correlate with an article's impact. But there really isn't any denying that alt metrics can be used really well in terms of marketing and communications tracking. So here we can use the alt metrics donut to better understand our journal's engagement online. We can use these scores to track our marketing effectiveness and whether or not the tactics we're implementing are truly communicating science clearly. But while this isn't always the case, an article that is more easily understood will probably have a higher alt metric score than articles that are obscure or perhaps difficult to comprehend. Another hypothesis, so to say, is that an article that had a clearly written press release or that had an understandable abstract, maybe it was blogged about or promoted highly on social media, might have a higher alt metric score than other articles that did not participate in these marketing activities. So while we're not arguing for or against alt metrics as a journal metrics tool, so to say, we are encouraging you to use it as a marketing tool and gauge whether your articles are benefiting from these communication tactics. The second alt metrics tool is Plum Analytics. While Plum Analytics is still in sort of a beta testing phase, we can see that they have broken down a variety of journal metrics into 5 distinct categories. This includes usage, captures, mentions, social media, and finally, citations. Furthermore, Plum allows you to use alt metrics in terms of measuring a variety of factors. You can measure an entire university or college. You can measure one department within that college, such as the cellular biology department or the business administration department. You can measure a specific researcher or author. And you can also measure just a specific journal title or its articles. So as I stated before, Plum is still in the startup mode. It's not very widely used yet. I believe it's really just being tested at the University of Pittsburgh and the Smithsonian. So while you may not be able to use Plum right away to measure your effectiveness, it certainly could be a great tool down the road. So the final part of this section I'd like to discuss is a case study from the National Center of Research Methods. In this report, Kaisa Putinson and Rosalind Edwards wanted to see the effect Twitter would have on their newly published paper compared to other marketing tactics the publisher was using. On the first day, the journal retweeted their article once to their followers. Within 24 hours, the tweet had been retweeted 10 times to over 5,000 individuals and shared an additional 135 times using other social media tools such as Facebook, LinkedIn, email, and so on. The outcome of this effort was 861 article downloads within the first 24 hours. And this all resulted from just one tweet. So in the following weeks and months, the number of downloads, of course, declined sharply. But then an old tweet was retweeted by BBC Radio. And after this, the number of downloads increased again significantly, jumping from almost 0 to 400 in just a few hours. As the author said in an interview afterwards, this was clearly the Twitter effect. So we're going to wrap up this presentation by reminding you to make your research dynamic. The more research is put into an understandable language, the wider the distribution will be, and the more people will care about it. If scholarly research is understandable to a greater population of individuals, scientists, policymakers, media outlets, and the general public as a whole, it's possible we can work together to solve many cultural issues. Also remember, making science understandable is great for you. A clear research equals a higher distribution of consumption. And a higher consumption equals more notoriety for you and your research work. I want to read you a quick quote from Zachary Meisel from his article, Narrative versus Evidence-Based Medicine, and Not Or. Quote, scientific reports are generally dispassionate, characterless, and ahistorical, but their translation and dissemination should not be. Stories are an essential part of how individuals understand and use evidence, end quote. So to put this into short, we believe that statistics need stories and research needs reasoning. So hopefully this webinar was communicated clearly for you and you found the information very helpful, not like the cups Bridget and I got at Starbucks this morning. You can also contact us at tfulton@allenpress.com, that's my email, or Bridget Lamb at blamb@allenpress.com. So here are our references. They're quite lengthy. Bridget mentioned we did quite a bit of research for this webinar. But the slides will be posted the next couple days, and so you can look at those after they're posted. And so now I think Joanna's going to take some questions if we have any.
Thank you, Mark. We have a couple of questions in the webinar. I realize we're just a little bit past the hour, so some of you may need to move on to other things, but we'll go ahead and stick around and answer questions that you can see. If you want to continue to chat questions while we go over the Q&A here, you can do that as well. So the first question I got was about press releases.
So really the question is, once you've written a press release, what really is the next step in getting it propagated to the media? So how do you get a press release actually picked up by the press?
There's many online services you can use for this. One of them that we use is Vocus. There's also Newswise, PR Web. All of these sources allow you to distribute a press release to a pretty wide audience. There's also the old-fashioned way of just collecting media members in a spreadsheet and sending out an email to the press release. There's also many institutions that have pretty big research departments. They'll have their own marketing and communications team that'll help you distribute a press release on the author or researcher's behalf.
Great. Thank you, Taylor. The next question I got is, with so many social media resources, how can the reader decide on what is useful and what information is reliable?
That's tough. I mean, there is a lot of things out there. I think when you are reading on behalf of your society or your journal, linking back to reputable sources. I know personally, if I go to a website and it looks really sketchy, I don't believe it. But if you're linking back to your peer-reviewed publication, that looks a lot more reputable and is much more official. So, yeah, link to your journal, link to your society website. If you have a good reputation, then your websites will too.
And do you have any recommendations for effectively promoting posts?
I would say, I think repetition is your friend. I think a lot of people make the mistake of tweeting or posting something once. And the fact is that a lot of times that one post, you're going to miss the vast majority of your audience. So, tweeting articles multiple times, tweeting news and events multiple times. I think unless you're just doing it way too much, I don't think your audience is going to care as much as you'd probably think.
Especially on Twitter, where things are really sort of fleeting in the Twitter stream. Mm-hmm. We got a great comment from one of our participants. Greg today said, just a note about faculty motivations. Professors get tenure based on teaching, research, and service, and in terms of research, citations are often really important. And of course, public exposure of research can really help with that. So I think we definitely agree with that point. Thanks for sharing that, Greg. I don't see any other questions in the chat stream, so I think we'll go ahead and wrap things up. I do want to point out that if you're looking for help with your marketing programs, please do go ahead and contact Allen Press, either your account manager or your director of business development here at Allen Press. We'd really like to help out and see if maybe the Journal and Society marketing program that we have at Allen Press might be a good fit for you. I also want to mention that we will be sending out a brief survey that will include links to both the slides and the video recording of today's session. So please do take a few moments to complete the survey. We're always looking for feedback. We'd like to know how we can improve on future webinars. And of course, we also always appreciate suggestions for future topics. Thanks very much for joining us today.